And this is CBC Alumni Focus. I am Rob Stagenborg, the Alumni Director, and very honored and very pleased to have my old religion teacher, Brother Armand Alcazar. Brother, welcome back to CBC.
Thanks. Great to be back, especially when I didn't have to travel.
I know. I'll tell you, with the world of Zoom, it brings everybody right to your computer screen. So you're obviously in Chicago. You've been teaching there for many years. You want to kind of give people a little bit of catch up of where have you been in the past 30 years?
Sure. So I was at CBC with you from 80 to 86. And then in 86, I made kind of a big move for me up until 86. From 71 to 86, I taught and was in campus ministry with high schools. And then starting in 86, I went to our university in Memphis to be the campus minister for CBC in Memphis. But I got an itch, and and some friends from St. Louis. St. Louis is the culprit in this. They gave me a going away book that set my spirituality on fire. And I said, I could live, breathe, and eat this stuff. And so I went away after 2 years in Memphis to go for my PhD. The other part of that was when I told them at CBC after 2 years of campus ministry, I said, I miss teaching. I'd like to get in the classroom. And they said, well, you got to go away and get smarter before you teach on the university level. So things converged nicely, and I went away to Berkeley and came back with a PhD in religious studies. So I went back to Memphis for 13 years, and then I was elected the auxiliary provincial of the district. So that's what brought me back to my hometown of Chicago in 2004. I did it for one term. I loved it. But once again, that teaching itch got me. And I said, hey, if you don't mind, I'd really like to go back to teaching. So I went back to Lewis University, where I started my whole brothers thing. Taught there for 10 years. And then, to be honest, Rob, I lost it. I'm one of these guys who I always thought, well, when the time came, I'm going to spread all my cards on the table and say, when I'm 72, what do I want to do next? Well, it didn't happen that way at all. I started slipping. I was no longer interesting to students. And I think, some of my friends try to protect me, and they say, oh, well, Brother Armand, these kids today, they're just so difficult and they change. Well, students change every 5-10 years, and a great teacher adjusts. And I lost that ability. So I retired 3 years ago, and it's been fantastic. I mean, here's how I define retirement, Rob. It isn't retiring from activity. I'm still engaged. I still get to do things. We'll probably talk about some of that. But the clock no longer rules me. I rule my clock. And I tell you what a privilege that is. I now know what it means when people congratulate me when I say I've retired. I didn't get that at first, but I do now. So that's been my itineraries the last 30 years.
And what a valuable tool to be able to manage your own time and not have your time managed for you. I can't even imagine that.
Right. And here's the other thing, the second thing, to be able to do things one at a time. It's I think for the last number of years before retirement, when I multitasked, I think it was a brag about being mediocre.
Wow.
When you get to do one thing, I think you do a lot better.
Exactly. Well, you are doing one thing, and you've been doing a lot of research on the brothers and the legacy with the brothers. And this is a very exciting project. I know you're just kind of getting started with. Maybe kind of give us a little bit of an overview of what the project is, first of all.
Sure. And let me give you the quick history of it, too. Let's see. We're at 2021. I'm graduating in 2017. So in 2015, a colleague of mine from Lewis University, a psychologist, Dr. Susan Sheffers, was just going out to our formation program in California called the Buttermer Institute. And it's a 3-year program. And she, for her reasons, and for my reasons, well, I'll explain in a minute, thought it would be important to get the brothers' stories. That's a big movement these days, I find. I'm really excited about that, the whole power of story. And I'll give you examples of that too, of what we mean by power, because it's no small thing. Anyway, I noticed two things. One, we're dropping like flies. When I came in the Institute, just the St. Louis district, which we were called, was the largest district in the world with 1,000 brothers. Okay. And our average age was 28. That same district, now called, with minor adjustments here and there, is now called the Midwest District. And from 1,000 brothers, we now have 109, I think. Wow. And our average age is 75. All right. So one reason I wanted to collect these stories. The second reason is it's probably difficult for people like, say, in Memphis or St. Louis to realize that in the greater Catholic Church, the vast majority of Catholics have never heard of a brother. Almost everyone's heard of nuns and sisters, of course, priests, bishops, cardinals, but most people don't even know that brothers exist in the Catholic Church. So for those two reasons, as our number was dwindling, I thought, I don't want all those years of service and dedication to be forgotten. And so Susan and I used to go to it was a bar in the local country club right near Lewis, and they'd let us order a lunch, and we would meet once a week for a full semester on how we might approach this topic. And so for a few years, I had to write an annual report for Lewis. It's called an annual review. And the last question is always, do you have any up and coming projects? And I would always we called it the LaSallian Legacy Project, to go and sit down with a brother, come up with a set of questions. I ended up with 27, to ask the brothers to prompt them to be able to tell their life story. And then while I was working on that on the computer, I got dinged, and Lewis University told me that I had become eligible for a sabbatical. And I thought, perfect. I'm never going to get this done unless I have some. So I promised that I would have at least 30 interviews, kind of learn as I go, done by that semester, at the end of that semester sabbatical. And so that's what got me started. So I now have, I guess, I don't know, maybe in the mid 90s worth of interviews, oral histories. I have two more that I have two more to go of brothers who said, yes, I want to do it. However, I'm going to advertise again. There are about 15 brothers who said, hey, I'm really not interested at this point. We'll give them one more chance, because of course you got to want to do it. And then we'll go from there. So that's kind of the history of the project and what it is. They go from, the shortest interview was 45 minutes. The longest interview was 4.5 hours.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. And I can imagine just the stories, because again, these are folks who, came into the brotherhood, came into religious life, and that they just have some just very poignant and very emotional stories about their time and forming young men and forming young women, in education. What are some of the stories, things that kind of popped out in your head as you've been talking to the brothers?
Well, I'll tell you something about the process to affirm what you just said. I was interviewing one of our 89-year-olds, and at the end, I was green yet. I turned the camera off too early. And so I'm unwinding and everything, and he's sitting there like this with his head dropped. And then he looks up and he says, Armand, I've told you things I've never told anyone in my life. And I said, wow, I'll keep him anonymous. I said, well, Rob, I so appreciate your trust in that. And he says, yeah, I guess I was never asked before. And so I think that's one of the things I wanted to tell you about the power of story. I'll tell you 2 or 3 other quick little vignettes about how I've learned about the power of story. Okay. One guy I'm thinking of has rather severe Parkinson's, and he shakes when he talks, and in fact his voice quivers. And the longer and longer we talked, the more composed his body was, and the less his voice shook. It was as he got so into his story. By the end, you couldn't tell that this guy had Parkinson's. I'll give you one other Parkinson's story. Another guy, I went to see him. We'll call him Don. And so I'm setting up, and he's in a nursing home. And there were 3 or 4 of the guys in the nursing home. So he was my second guy. And he said, Armand, had I known you were coming, if I remembered, I would have called you and said not to come to see me. I got this Parkinson's. And today I happen to feel like shit. I just don't. I said, hey, Richard, let's start in 2 minutes. If you don't want to do it, I'm a phone call away. We'll just stop. I'll come and get another tea. He says, thank you. I really appreciate that. Well, 2 hours and 45 minutes later, I said, well, the last question. I wanted to tell you about each of those pictures on the wall. As people tell their story, there's an energy. The last story on this was a 91-year-old I got there a day before his interview. What I would do, Rob, is I would send a sign-up list to the communities and say, I'm coming. Anyone who would like or be willing, sign up the list, da-da-da-da-da-da. So this guy, let's say he signed up for a Wednesday. I got there a Tuesday. And on that Tuesday, he was coming home from the hospital after having a congestive heart failure. So, of course, there was a nurse there and da-da-da. They're walking him. He's in and out of bed. So the next day he signed up for 2. I went to his room and he's in bed. So obviously I didn't bother him. And I saw him in the TV room later before dinner. And I went up to him and said, I keep on making up names here. I said, hey, Jeff, so good to see you. I'm so glad you're able to come home today. But I didn't want to mention the interview because I didn't want to push. So I asked the director after supper, I said, hey, I don't know Jeff that well. There was something in his eye that kind of told me he may want to do the interview. Can you find out for me? And he said, sure. So he comes back laughing. He says, yeah, he wants you to meet him in his room tonight, 8:00 in his room. So there was this stark wooden chair that he sat on. He gave me this plush chair. He sat in the middle of this room. And I swear, if you saw that interview, you would be impressed with this guy's vim and vigor and humility and humor. And he died 10 days later.
Wow.
Final story on the other end of the power story. One guy signed up early who, to be very honest, I always thought him to be a passive-aggressive SOB. I just... I didn't, but I thought, hey, now make sure, be good at this. Well, the interview started. I couldn't get over the guy's vulnerability, honesty, and some difficult things that went on. So about 25 minutes into the interview, I was changed. His story changed my attitude. Now, I saw him a couple of weeks later after the words went up and thought we had this new bond. And we didn't. He was the still passive-aggressive SOB, always was. But I was changed. I knew now his story. And so I could only think positively of him, not negatively like I used to. It was like, oh, that's why. And so I've been so convinced of this power of story.
That's really powerful because, again, once you know someone's story and know the shoes they've walked in, it really gives you so much perspective as to why they do things and why they act, why they lash out, for instance. So, certainly I can imagine that was really an emotional time for you to meet these guys who were your mentors.
Exactly.
They're opening up to you.
Exactly. Yeah, there more than a number of times I can remember sitting there with a lump in my throat and just being the recipient of having somebody trust me with their story. It was quite a privileged quite a privileged project.
Sure. In my position, I run into alumni all the time, and certainly they all have memories of their times in the school, and they get together, football games, girlfriends, what have you. What do old brothers talk about? Did they have memories? Obviously, of the classroom. I'm sure they remember a few of the knuckleheads they had, but what are some of the common themes that you picked up in these interviews about teaching?
Yeah, that's a great and tough question. The first thing that comes to mind is, what I think I figured out is that I would say with about 90% accuracy, brothers remember their first assignment best. Isn't that interesting? I thought it was interesting, but and most of the time it's fondly.
Yeah.
I'll tell you another interesting thing is, by and large, brothers would do it all over again, which has always been neat. There was a handful, and I mean that literally. Maybe you can count on one hand the number who said, especially the ways things change, had I known all this, I would have gotten out while the getting was good. Less than 5. I also noticed this, that brothers who talk about, a lot of times there's a choice. You gotta, especially when we were young, we wanted to be in control of the classroom. Classroom control was a big, and you've heard the war stories about that. Yeah. But they say as they got older, if there was a choice between being just and being merciful, as they got older, they became more merciful and wished they had gotten to that point earlier. The whole thing about, well, this kid's not going to pull anything over my eye, the wool over my eyes, that was kind of like when we were young and all. But by and large, I remember one thing for one guy who was just he was just known for being a crusty guy. And I asked him if he had a do-over, what would you like to do over? And I remember a tear came to his eye, and he said, I wish I was kinder. I wish I was nicer. It was so tough for me to hear. I mean, especially after hearing his story. And by and large, most don't have regrets. Some do, and the regrets they have are touching. Yeah.
Do the brothers get a sense, that even though they may not hear from the students, that they're very much revered and respected? I mean, sometimes when students graduate, you don't really hear from them again. But again, in the alumni office, we hear all those stories. But do those stories ever filter out to you guys? And do you kind of, keep in contact with former students? Is that something that the brothers really talked about at all?
Well, it really varies widely from brother to brother. So some hear from many and some less so. I know, I've adopted a little I call it a COVID habit. Each morning, I also, because I'm able to do it being retired, but I go to my east window, which has a recliner facing east, which is the sunrise and the Chicago skyline. And I light a candle first. I got a table full of books, cup of coffee with a toast as a delivery system, piece of toast as a delivery system for my pills. And for the first, it depends. It could be 5 minutes, it can be a half hour. I let myself just sit and meditate, and sometimes I think. And here's one of the new things before I read. If somebody pops into my mind, many times it's a former student or just a friend. If they pop into my mind a second time, no matter if I haven't seen them or talked to them in 6 months or in 50 years, and I mean that, it's probably the spread, I try to look them up. I go to Facebook or Friends or search engines or da-da-da, and I drop them a text or an email or even a phone call and say, I just wanted to know you came into my prayer twice this week, and I wanted to let you know that I remember you fondly or something. So I do the reaching out on that. I'm one of our few, by and large in religious life, most religious are introverts. and the same is in our order. Most of us are introverts. I'm an extrovert, and so but I could imagine introverts doing that too. But I'm a person who needs contact, and so I both reach out, and I think my biggest blessing is that I am able to have a number of relationships from places that where I've been. Yeah.
Oh, great. Again, we're talking with Brother Armand Alcazar, and brother, there has to be I'm not sure the word, but I mean, how blessed are you to be chosen to be you and Susan to be the ones to get these stories? Because I mean, as you said, it's really enriching you, and you're seeing another side of brothers that you never knew. So I just can't imagine, what this is doing for you.
Right, right. And let me tell you that now the pipe dream for these is one, like you and I were talking about, we got to figure out a way to make these available while respecting the brothers' stories for the general public. And so we will be more and more working on this so that there might be a database that someone might be able to go to and check to see, hey, is this story available? Next, I would love to have to develop a half-hour program, TV program, called De La Salle Christian Brothers of the Midwest that might show in Minneapolis, Chicago, St. Louis, and Memphis. And the first 2 10-minute segments would be the same. That would be, who is St. John Baptist de La Salle and what's a brother? The next segment might be popular or well-known popular Christian brothers. So for example, Brother Timothy from the winery in San Francisco. He was a well-known vintner. Mm-hmm. From the East Coast, maybe Brother Jaspers, the only non-baseball player to make the Baseball Hall of Fame. He invented the 7th inning stretch. And say in our own district, it could be, for example, he's still alive, 97-year-old, I don't remember if he's 96 or 97, Brother Terrence, who integrated the Memphis schools. And so that could be the second 10 minutes of whoever we choose, well-known, maybe cult figure brothers. And then the last 10 minutes would change in each of those cities. And we might have an edited version of 6 or 7 brothers from St. Louis, having them tell parts of their story in an edited way, and that people might know them who were there in St. Louis for quite a while. But there's one thing missing from them, from the videos right now, and that's what I'd have to work on next. That is, the most interesting stories of the brothers and the most authentic, of course, never say, oh, I was really great and everybody loved me. What I need to include now is to go back, maybe brother by brother, and get together a collection of maybe 3 to 5 people who knew them to say, what did you remember most about brother so-and-so, and why was he special or wasn't he? To have other people, because the brothers don't, by and large, it might come as a shock, but by and large, the brothers are pretty humble. Mm-hmm. And they never brag. And so that part is missing from the tapes. Yeah, I think that would be the next portion, to get to sit people down and interview people talking about their memories or what they appreciate most about Brother X, Y, or Z.
Well, that's great. Again, brother, if there's anything we can help you here in St. Louis, I'm sure the other LaSallian schools will be, happy to jump aboard. Again, we think this is a very important project. In speaking with alums, I mean, so many connections are with those Christian brothers and so many stories. And again, as the alums are passing on, I mean, those stories are being lost as well. So kudos to you, and kudos to the brothers for really having some foresight to putting this together.
Yeah. When I approached the visitor at the time to give them the idea and asked if they would be interested in helping to support, they were fantastic, just fantastic. I just got a green light. Like I say, I've traveled as far as Europe, Singapore, Hong Kong, Philippines. Yeah, so I've had nothing but support for the whole project.
Well, as we kind of wrap up with you, what do you got going for the summer? I know you're locked in COVID, obviously, last year. Got any travels? Anything you got? Anything exciting coming up?
Well, I will tell you about the second little project that keeps me, I never say busy, I'll say that keeps me engaged. It's the other end of the population. I am a part of a group, what used to be known as St. Mary's Press is now known as Larry, the Lasallian Educational Research Institute. And so one arm of that institute is a research team that studies this newest generation born since 1995 and their trends. And so it started out that we were interested in why that youngest population that are now in our high schools and colleges, why they are disaffiliating from the church faster than any other group. And we published a book called Going, Going, Gone with the results of that nationwide survey. We were so moved and worried with the information that we got from that we changed the direction of Springtide. That's the name of the group, Springtide, one word. And now we're one of the leading research teams studying Gen Z or iGens. They have many names. But now we're studying what impacts them and how might we best accompany them. We, meaning older generations. How might we best mentor them, accompany them, give them a go-ahead with their expertise? For example, they date later. They have fewer teen pregnancies. They kill each other less than any teen population since there's been studies. They marry later. Those might all be positive. Some of the negative, starting with the wham bam one, is they kill themselves more by far. 39% males kill themselves more than any other teen group that we've studied. 50% more females. They are the most joyless group. They're known as the loneliest generation. And so we decided to switch our tune. Disaffiliation's a topic, but instead it's how can we best accompany them to allow them to do what they do so well. And so that's been a wonderful project that I'll continue to work on. Until COVID, I got to go to a few places in the country to present to schools, faculties, churches, youth groups, parishes about the trends that we found. We've since published 4 more books. The last one called Relational Authority. The one before that was called Belonging. So the newest one, the newest publication that will come out, I think maybe in a few months, is going to be called The New Normal. And so I've got the great opportunity to study brothers at an average age of 78 and iGens, especially 13 to 25-year-olds. And so those are the things that keep me going.
Wow. Again, important work, again, as the church faces this crossroads, to get to the bottom of this instead of just lamenting it, really doing some studies, I think is really important. So,
right.
Again, brother, thanks for joining us again. We'll be catching up with you again. I know a lot of people have very fond memories of you when they were here in the 80s, and certainly you're a member of the board and have been very much involved here in St. Louis. So again, just want to say thank you for all you do, and thank you for putting this project together. I think I'm very excited about that. A lot of people have so many memories of the brothers, good and bad. But again, I think it'd be great for people to be able to access that database.
Thanks. And thanks so much for reaching out, Rob. Really appreciate it. Love that you're there.
That's great. I'm going to put you on pause, and then I'm going to go ahead and close out our interview. This is Alumni Focus with Brother Armand Alcazar. Thank you.